Morning, good morning. Teka lang, intro lang tayo. Good morning guys. So, pasensya na for waiting a bit, no? I think you waited for 8 minutes. So anyway, for those who will be joining in later, so just go through this. If you will notice, no, 13 slides lang yan. So we will go through this very quickly. It's not going to last very long, no? So ang topic natin ngayon is about transaction and economic exposure. So meron tayong risk dito, no? So it's a part of international finance, international transactions, and people, especially those dealing with international companies have this kind of exposures. No? So if you decide eventually to just work for local companies, then hindi nyo na to ma-experience. No? But I think more or less sa ngayon, no, in the setup of the world as we know it, parang halos lahat ng exposure ngayon, no, is global in nature, no. So we have a global supply chain, no. Okay, so tingnan natin yung mga nandito. Trisha May, Beverly, Ara, Camille, Monique Joyce, Mary Jane, Jean, Paula, and Kim. Thank you very much for watching. Ayun po. So, going back no sa sinasabi natin, the world as we know it has gone really global, no? So that means we really can't help it but transact globally, no, with an economic exposure that extends to the rest of the world. So, meaning even if, for example, no, COVID lang, no, example lang natin yung COVID. Kasi, of course, the book that we got this from never experienced 2020 as we know it, right? Pero if you will just look at the happening ng pandemic, no? So, even as Europe and North America is already unshackled, no? In their fight against COVID. Ibig sabihin, kahit na sila ay medyo nakakalaya na ng konti, no? But if the rest of the world is not out of the woods yet, no? Lalo na if we're talking about mabuti tayo kahit paano. Nakikita na natin ang liwanag eh. But, of course, with all due respect to our brothers and sisters from the rest of the world, lalo na sa places like, again, with all due respect, no, baka kasi eventually may makapanood dito, no, sa Africa and places like it's really hard to get, vaccines. Through no fault of their own, no, especially yung nation. Kasi nga if you will look at it, no, talagang cargo ng bansa, yung kanyang population. It's all part of the philosophy of politics and national governance eh, no. Hindi po pwede pabayaan yung kanyang citizen. However, kung talagang wala kang magagawa, no, kundi just go through it and labanan siya with the meager resources that the nations have. Lalo na pag ipinasok mo pa yung tinatawag na poverty levels, yung Gini coefficient, yung mga coefficient na ina-attach natin sa mga countries na masyadong wide ang margin between the poor and the rich people. So mataas talaga, no? It's an abyss, no? For example, no, we have friends from Nigeria, right? I think some of them are even studying in LPU, right? And if you talk to them, no, I have a friend who I think teaches now in LPU. Naging kaklase ko siya dati sa MBA dyan, no, sa LPU Batangas, and I got a long talk with him. He was saying na in Nigeria, yung when you graduate at 2021, talagang sobrang lucky mo na, you're so lucky to graduate at such an early time. Kasi talagang, sometimes daw there would be like 1 year or 2 years without education. Kasi if the rebels start bombing the schools, okay, declaration, no schools, no? And this happened 90s, no? Time namin. So I don't know if ngayon ganun pa rin, but it's harder in war-stricken nations. Lalo na kayo, no? In this class, for example, the people who are watching right now, hi to Princess, Iris, Ella. Halos lahat kayo babae, no? If you're in places like Afghanistan, no? I mean, 'di ba? Imagine niyo yung ano ngayon, no? Those who are almost finishing, nakita ko sa CNN, almost finishing their education, doctorate, they had to go back to their families, and some of them have to really rush to the airport just to go to the US or whatever, no, kung saan man lugar, wherever they want to be, because against sila sa ano yung kanilang government ngayon is against sa women getting educated. So, it's you and I, all of us, no? Lalo na ang yung generation ninyo. We are really part of the global nature of business. And so, pagdating sa transactions, wala tayong choice kung hindi maging affected din sa nangyayari dun sa companies kung saan situated yung, o sa countries kung saan situated yung mga companies that we deal with, no? Isang example lang, no? Take for example cars, no? Kasi syempre yung Toyota nasa cars, no, business. It's not just coming from one place like Japan, no? Hindi. And Japan gets all these parts from all over the world, no? Like it or not, no? Hindi natin gusto, for example, ang China, but even yung iPhones natin, saan pinamanufacture? Even yung Volkswagen, saan yan pinamanufacture? Sa China yan eh. So that is the reason why the global supply chain has gone global. Wala tayong magagawa. So talagang it's the product not just of one country like before, it's the product of the whole world. It's now yung dating feudal understanding na kung saan tayo lang, tayo nagpo-produce, tayo magko-consume, wala na yun eh. Talagang it's a global world out there. So lahat ng transactions natin will have to be done using the global supply chain. So having said that, syempre, if we indeed get caught in that, syempre, merong risks involved there, and also yung transaction and economic exposures are also included. Ayan. Okay, so sa mga bagong sali dyan, I think Justin, hindi ko pa nababati. Good morning, Justin. Ayan, no? So let's go to the next, no? So next slide, we have transaction and economic exposure. So as a business invests or operates in a foreign country, as I said, merong unang-una na lang na exposure dyan is the transaction cost of the exchange rate, no? May gains and losses, no? Sa ating previous na lesson, I've already told you how even as a traveler, nangyayari sa'yo yan. Eh di lalo na if you're talking about millions and millions of dollars invested in a foreign country. Kaya nga, there are ways, for example, when they would peg, the currency exchange rate. Kasi nga nahihirapan yung mga nag-i-invest because of that. Kaya as much as possible, it's not how high or how low your currency exchange rate is relative to the country. Hindi yun eh. Kundi how less volatile they are. Because pag masyadong volatile, yung volatility will be up and down, up and down. Naku, nahihirapan silang dyan. Nahihirapan silang project, mag-forecast. Kasi pag hindi ka makapag-forecast, nalulugi yung company because of that. So that is the reason why it's not so much how high or how low the exchange rate is. It's the volatility. Ang volatility ng exchange rate. Yan na nagko-cause talaga ng matinding headache sa kanila, no? Yung mga yon, yung mga gains or losses na yon, ang tawag doon transaction exposure or transaction risks. Economic exposure sometimes, no? Lalo na nung wala, ano pa kayo nito nasa high school pa siguro, no? Or baka iba sa inyo nasa elementary pa. Nung si Pinoy ang president, hindi ko alam kung paano nangyari doon, but the mining law, no? They would start it in February, very much upbeat about it. Yung mining law, yung tipong allowing yung foreign countries to mine here in the Philippines. Ang daming debate over dyan, no? Lalo na if you're environmentalist and then versus people naman who saying na wala namang ibang pwedeng gawin din sa lugar ninyo kundi mag-mine. Kasi nasa minefield talaga, something like that. No? Maraming debate niyan. And then there was this Gina Lopez saying, the late Gina Lopez saying, no, we can convert it to a tourist spot o tourism spot. So, dung time na yun, it's actually political in nature, pero you can consider it as economic. Magpapasa ng mining law, no? Biglang i-repeal, no? Or may babaguhin. At alam nyo nung time na yan, talagang grabe ka risky mag-invest sa mining, no? And kung ikaw ay invested, no? Lalo na sa mga ganyang business or industry, you would second guess or you would make second thoughts kung pupunta ka ba sa Philippines or not. Because napaka-uneasy. Hindi mo alam kung ano magiging final verdict. Naipasa na batas na na-repeal pa So, yun ang problema nun, no? And I read before, no? Kasi nga, nasa stock market ako. So, nakita ko dun kung paano yung political instability ng isang bansa is really putting a hammer down on the economy and the stock market. Kasi ang nangyayari doon is yung Australian block, I think there was a big Australian company na into mining who literally backed out, no? Talagang nag-back out siya and eventually ang nangyari ay hindi na talaga sila nag-invest in the Philippines. Oo, 'di ba? Hindi sila nag-invest, talagang nag-pull out sila sa Philippines because of that, no? So, I think from then until now, hindi nakakabawi pa ang mining natin, no? Because of that. Kasi nga this is uninsured foreign denominated investment. So FDI yan. Papasok sa atin, mag-i-invest. Kaso nga lang, since pag ganun-ganon yung government, so wala na. So I'm sure merong reason for that. No? Siyempre, environment first, ganyan. They could not allow our country to be raped by ganun ang mga ano nun ang labanan dun. But again, correct me if I'm wrong, and I hope I made myself clear. No, I'm not against not allowing these people to mine here. Hindi ako for mining. Ang point ko lang is that because of yung urong-sulong ng government, ang nangyayari ay nagkakaroon tayo ng problem. Kasi tandaan nyo, hindi yung decision kundi yung instability ng decision ang nagmamatter talaga. So, ganun din sa economics, ganun din sa yung sasabi natin na translation, exposure, and then tax, no? Importante din ang taxation. Napakataas ang taxation sa atin sa Philippines. At hindi lang mataas, no? Well, kung titingnan mo parang akala mo maliit lang Ang problema sa atin, napaka-complicated ng taxation sa Philippines, no? Imagine niyo to, no? In other countries, simple lang yan. Yung sales, kung anong percent, 15%, sige, 15%. Ngayon, sabi nga, no, merong isang nagsabi dyan na, you know what is the analogy of taxation here in the Philippines is, it's like asking those gigantic companies, asking them, how much can you spare for the government? Parang in short, in Tagalog, magkano ba gusto niyong bayaran na tax? O sige, yun ang ibayad nyo. Parang, masyadong unstable natin at saka sobrang complicated. In fact, ngayon nga, maging CPA din sa Philippines compared sa maging CPA ka abroad, no? Like in the US, Commonwealth nation, napakasimple lang. Nagiging complicated lang because of yung lugar. Like, in this county, ito yung interest rate, ito yung tax rate dyan, sa kabila naman ganyan. But in the Philippines, sa atin lang yung income tax return, personal exemption, gantong ganyan. Samantalang kung titignan mo, bakit hindi mo pa kumpitin yung ratio, no? And then just go with kung whatever, 12%, 12%. So yung mabababang tax, ganito ang bawas, pag yung sales, no? Pag abang umaakyat, pag ganyan naman, 'di ba? Parang masyadong unstable. And so, yung mga mag-i-invest sana from outside, when they see na, sige, magkano magiging tax rate natin dyan, we cannot answer directly. Sabi natin, okay, ang corporate tax 35%. Pero hindi naman lahat lang 'yon, no? May sales tax, may VAT, expanded VAT. So, ilang percent ba talaga? So, 'di ba? Parang gusto nila sabihin nilang, I cannot forecast my earnings in the Philippines because of the so many rules that you guys are saying over there. So, because of that, it's really, tandaan niyo it's really monetary and fiscal policy. Now, kailangan ekonomista ang nasa executive. Hindi naman masasabing hindi ekonomista yung mga previous na administration, di ba? So, hindi mo rin masabi. I think it's more of political will talaga. Kasi pag may ginalaw ka dyan, maapektuhan. Laging may maapektuhan na sector. No? Kaya nga, ang ibang nation like, Singapore, they had to go through rough times before nila maayos talaga yung kanilang nation. Okay? So yun, no? So yung exposure and strategies ng mga international company na ginagawa para ma-reduce yung mga losses na yun and sa kanila mga economic exposure. However, siyempre hindi naman kayang ilagay yun. So this is just sa short lessons natin, no? So this will just be an overview of all this, no? So exposure types, ano yung exposure when it comes to currency risk, no? Meron silang mga currency risk na ang tawag natin ay exposure, no? Ang exposure kasi, it changes a company, siyempre yung profit niya, yung cash flow, yung market value. So lahat ng mga company na nagta-transact internationally, meron silang exposures, no, na dinadaanan. At dito diniscuss yung apat, no. Wait lang guys, may nahanap ako sa table. Okay. So first is transaction exposure, no. So more or less yung ginawa kong intro, halos yun na yun yung risk of transactions denominated in different currencies. So mayroon kang transaction na ang nangyayari ay maaring different currencies yung bunubuo ng transaction na yun. Maaring halimbawa, no, meron ka sa US tapos dadaan ng Japan o Thailand, no. Halimbawa diyan sa Batangas, kung familiar kayo sa Maribasa manufacturing, no? Yan ay Thailand, no? So dadaan ka sa Thailand, no? Tapos pupunta ka sa Philippines, right? Tapos for example, mag-export ka naman, ililipat mo naman for example sa Germany or whatever. So di ba, all those transactions, bawat translation nun, bawat conversion necessitates risk, no? Siyempre, currency risk, yung pagbabago lang, no? A change in an exchange rate alters the value of outstanding financial obligation. Kung meron kang receivable, no, bumaba yung rate versus that currency, affected ka. Kasi syempre parang lumalabas, parang stock market din yung receivable mo. Kasi kung denominated yan ng foreign, right? So, ang ginagawa ng iba, binubook na lang nila yan sa original na currency para lang meron silang ready currency na based doon sa currency na kung saan man yun, no? Kung Switzerland ba yan, Swiss, di ba? Kung kaya US dollars, ganyan, no? So, ganun. At hindi lang receivable yan, pati payable. Paano kung biglang bumaba yung currency mo, di tataas ngayon yung utang mo, no? Kasi nagso-strong ang dollars eh. So, ang pinaka-worst pa nito, if you are losing, our currency is losing against the dollar, therefore yung dollar lumalaki ang presyo, and then you had to change the currency from peso to dollars para magbayad naman doon sa kabilang country na hindi US dollars, no? Halimbawa, ito, hindi magandang example dahil pwede naman tayo mag-change directly sa euro. For example lang, no? Hindi ka makaka-change sa euro. Dadaan ka muna sa dollar, lugi ka, no? Halimbawa, tumataas ang dollar versus the peso. So ano mangyayari? Malulugi ka, 'di ba? Kasi tumataas ang dollars versus the peso, therefore nagwi-weaken ang peso mo. Ang pambayad mo ay peso. So mas malaki na ngayon ang kailangan mong i-raise na peso para bayaran yung utang mo, hindi pa sa dollars ha, kasi kino-convert mo pa lang sa dollars kasi hindi ka kunwari makakadiretso dun sa euro currency. Again, as I said, this is not a good example, but something that you have to ponder by. And then, ito mas worse, double whammy to. Halimbawa, the dollar naman is weakening against the euro. Diba? Imagine mo, double whammy yun. Diba? Kung ikaw, magko-convert ka sa dollar, nalulugi yung peso versus the dollar, therefore, mas malaki kailangan mong peso to buy, the usual dollars na binabayad mo. Ang problema, yung dollars mo, mas kailangan mong mas malaki ang bilhin kasi nalulugi naman siya versus the euro. So imagine if you have like 3 or 4 currencies that you had to go through in the case, no? Yung transaction na ganyan. So, grabe, di ba? Grabe ang losses na ma-incur mo. Of course, on the other hand naman, pag naman ang nangyari ay nagsa-strengthen naman ang currency mo, local currency, no? Like peso versus the yen or peso versus the British pound. Pag gano'n na nangyayari, medyo okay ka naman dyan. Kaya nga, ang mahalaga dyan, hindi ka heavily laden with dollar-denominated loans o kaya naman foreign currency-denominated loans. Kasi pag nangyari yun, you are also worrying about transaction exposure. Ayan. No? So, yun mga ganun, guys, ha? So, for example, dito, ang nilagay niya dito ay Swiss Cruises, Swiss company, so parang cruise to, no? Buys US supplies and sells cruises to US customers. So, bumibili sila ng US supplies, tapos binibenta nila yung service na cruises to US customers. However, hence it prices its supplies in US dollars. Siyempre, babayaran sa kanila yon in US dollars. However, yung in-explain ko dito, any fluctuation in the US dollar Swiss franc rate will alter the financial obligation. Kasi ang ano niyan, hindi kagad yan nagbabayad ng cash. Hindi naman yan cash lagi, di ba? May mga terms yan. 7 days, 15 days, 30 days, di ba? So, yung pagpapalit ng exchange rate, talaga nakaka-apekto. Okay? Economic exposure is how a firm's expected cash flow are affected by unexpected changes in currency exchange rate, no? Exchange rate, yung exchange rate nag-alter ng future sales, prices and costs, no? We also call it operating exposure, no? Competitive exposure, strategic exposure, yan tatlong yan, no? Yung mga exchange rate kasi ina-alter niyan yung mga susunod na mga sales, no? Ibig sabihin, maaring yun nga, yung example natin dito, alam mo, nagbebenta ka ng ng chocolate. Yan dati nung anong yan, no? Nung time na uso yung mga balikbayan na yung mga boxes, no? Tapos binebenta yan sa meron silang lugar na pinagbebentahan sa macro ganyan. Tapos yung price mo sales, no? Siyempre, affected siya because nag-ooperate ka dito sa certain ano natin dito sa Philippines. Mabuti kung parating dito, ready-made na yung goods, right? So nagpa-fluctuate yun. O example niya dito, yung Swiss Cruises, the same Swiss Cruises, no, pays most of its cost in francs. So French, and receive 50% of its revenue in US dollars. So, di ba, yung kanyang revenue daw, yung kanyang sales, nare-receive niya in dollars. Yung kanyang cost naman, French francs. O Swiss francs ba to? Teka, tingnan natin. Baka Swiss francs. Sorry, baka Swiss francs yung sinasabi niya. Oo nga, Swiss francs. Sorry. Nakita ko francs eh. Akala ko French eh. So, Swiss francs. So, ito yung sinatawag na CHF na taker, no? Currency, ano ba tawag doon? Currency acronym ba? Basta yung CHF, ito yun. Swiss, dito sa kwentong ito, nagpe-pay siya ng cost niya in francs, so Swiss, pero nare-receive niya yung revenue niya 50% in US dollars. Unfortunately, Swiss Cruises cannot raise its price. Hindi siya po pwede mag-raise ng price kasi yung vacation cruises are highly competitive. Natural, no? Hindi na po pwedeng itaas basta yan. Nag-lose siya ng customer pag ni-raise yung price niya. So if the Swiss franc is appreciating, ano ba, tumataas ang franc versus the US dollars, subsequently, yung cash flow niya will worsen. Bakit? Kasi yung kalahati ng revenue niya is in US dollars. Biro mo kung nananalo ito, baliktad naman to, guys. Nananalo naman yung Swiss franc versus the US dollars. So therefore, kaunti ang nare-receive mo in Swiss franc kasi nagde-depreciate ang dollar eh. Therefore, yung binabayad nila, kahit malaki pa yan, walang kwenta sa Switzerland yon, no? Kasi tama, Switzerland. So, ang nangyayari, kahit na nagde-depreciate yung dollar, and therefore, ang maliliit mo, ang cash flow mo, magiging konti. Diba? Kahit pa 50% ng revenue ng dollar, no? Kasi ang cost mo ay sa francs. Nananalo yung cost mo tumalaki, yung revenue mo lumiliit. Diba? So, yun ang problema doon, no? Ang maganda kung yung dollars ang mag-appreciate, tapos yung Swiss ang mag-depreciate, no? Kaya nga in the end, hindi siya ideal, okay na din. Wag lang na magfa-fluctuate sa up and down, kasi hindi mo talaga mapoproject. Yun ang mahirap. Yun, di ba? So labi na natin to. Yun, ganun lang naman yun. So ang nangyayari ay parang transaction cost din lang siya kasi ang ano lang naman dito is yung difference ng exposure niya when it comes to the change of location, no? Lalo na ang pinag-uusapan dito yung prices, yung cost, yung economic exposure yun. Although dito, yung example ko kanina na economic exposure, wala siyang kinalaman sa currency exchange rate. Pero still the same, they are called economic exposure. Although dito sa libro to, ang pinofocus lang kasi niya yung yung currency lang, no? So ang limitation dito sa may chapter na to will just focus on currency exchange rate. Okay? Translation referred to as accounting exposure is fluctuation. So, discuss na rin natin to, fluctuation, no? Halimbawa, since accounting exposure siya, halimbawa katulad ng Swiss Cruises, may inventory siya, no? May mga bagay siya na nabili niya nasa US dollars, tapos yung US dollar loans niya, same amount, no? Yung accountants, yung mga CPAs nila, kino-convert yung balance sheet niya into francs. Kasi syempre doon siya sa Switzerland naka-base, no? Pag nagde-depreciate yung US dollars, pag nagde-depreciate yung US dollars, yung value ng loan niya nagde-decrease. Kasi yung liabilities niya nagde-decrease din, no? However, yung value ng kanyang current asset is decreasing because of the dollar inventories. Kasi yung kanyang inventories ay nakabook sa, kumbaga ito guys, ang ibig sabihin lang nito translation, yung booking, no? Nakabook siya sa Switzerland, pero nabili niya yon in US, no? Tapos yung inventories niya ay in US dollars. Kaya ang nangyayari guys, totoong buhay, ang ginagawa nila, kino-convert na lang nila kagad yan. Agad, no? Pero ang problema kasi dito kung talagang yung inventory mo ay hindi mo muna kino-convert. Oo, tapos ang nangyayari ay nandiyan lang siya, hindi naman siya gumagalaw, right? Nandiyan siya, inventory siya. Hanggang hindi mo yan nase-sell, no? O hindi na pa-part ng ito ang example natin, Swiss Cruises lang eh. Paano yung mga manufacturing, no? Halimbawa, yung mga century canning, kukunin nila yan sa kung saang lugar, no? Hindi naman yan lahat nag-fishing dito sa atin. Tapos yung mga uh, aluminum, yung paggamit ng yung canning, 'di ba? Kasi canning eh, yung kanyang lalagyan, 'di ba? Lahat ng 'yun bago mo matapos lahat 'yan, nakabook 'yan do sa original value na binili mo eh, which is kung ano yung currency na 'yon, 'di ba? So, ang nangyayari because nagkakaroon ng decrease or increase yung inventory, since nakabook siya sa original currency, yun, nagkakaroon siya ng difference in the pricing or the cost on accounting books. So, nevertheless, sabi niya dito, merong Swiss accounting rules pa pala, no? Yung accountants use different exchange rate to convert US dollars inventories and US dollar loans into francs. So medyo may rule pa pala sila doon na iba ang pag-convert nila sa inventory at saka iba rin sa loans. So minsan nagkakaroon sila ng gains or losses by using the various exchange rates. So yan ang medyo concern siya. Ito naman, hindi naman to sa lahat ng oras. Kaya nga kami, natatandaan ko nung araw nasa bangko ko, anong nangyayari, meron lang first book sa booking rate sa umpisa, no? And then sa dulo, ina-adjust yun. Tapos whatever happens, ano lang, gain or loss lang, gain or loss, gain or loss. Ang problema kasi talaga dyan is over the long term. Pag talagang nakita mo na sobrang haba na ng time, tapos ang dulo ay, di ba, hindi naman pala siya mag-a-appreciate, pababa ng pababa. Yan ang mahirap pag ganun ang nangyari, no? So, another one is yung tinatawag na tax exposure, which is yung fluctuation naman on currency exchange rate affecting company cash flow and therefore yung kanyang taxable income. So, yun, may kinalaman din yun. Kanina, ang diniscuss ko is about the differences in taxation, lalo dito sa Philippines, no? Ito naman is yung currency exchange rate that affects the cash flow and therefore yung kanyang taxable income. No, kasi nga since yung currency exchange rate is booked, for example, where you are, the local balance sheet, no? Kahit yan ay sales mo nang galing ng ganito, ng Japan, ng Australia. So yun yung nagkakaroon ng differences, no? So yung mga losses niya sa mga transaction exposure, ang nangyayari, lumiliit naman yung taxable income niya. Okay? Whereas yung losses naman niya sa economic exposure reduces taxable income over future years. Kasi nga, yung nagiging na-incur mong loss doon sa bawat transaction, siyempre liliit yung magiging taxable income mo because of that, no? Yan. On the other hand, yung mga translation exposures not related to cash flows and they do not reduce taxable income, no? Pag may walang kinalaman sa cash flow, no, yung pagpasok ng cash or paglabas ng cash, no, yung mga ganung transaction, hindi siya nagre-reduce ng taxable income. So dito papasok yung mga non-cash transactions, no. So yung companies could gain profit from favorable changes in exchange rate, no? So halimbawa, yun yung tipong nag-a-accrue ka pa nga minsan ng income, no? Tapos hindi siya nagpumapasok yung cash. Hindi pa nagbabayad. Parang yun nangyari tuloy. Naalala ko tuloy yung rito, ang Enron, no? How they book that over the course of many years, no? Yun ang iba dyan, no? Anyway, so basta ito is yung differences lang nung exchange rate and therefore yung kanyang taxable income. Okay? So measuring and protecting against economic exposure. So, yung mga analyst, meron silang difficulties in measuring economic exposure. Meron kasing mga firm na hindi naman nila kayang i-forecast yung 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 kanilang cash flow. Talagang yung accurately ma-forecast kasi nagfa-fluctuate nga 'di ba? So, ang idea dito kasi para ma-protect mo yung sarili mo against economic exposure, kayo, yung firm, kailangan accurately ma-forecast niyo yung cash flows and yung exchange rates. Ang hirap nun, 'di ba? Kasi yung exchange rate, yung transaction exposure, na-alter niya yung nababago niya yung mga future cash flows habang yung currency exchange rate naman nagfa-fluctuate, no? Kaya kailangan ma-forecast niyang maigi yung cash flow. At since yan, kung may exposure ka pa sa iba't ibang country, lahat yun, pati yung mga exchange rate na yun, kailangan mong i-forecast. Kaya mahirap, no? So if a subsidiary sees positive cash flows, no, subsidiary, sa ilalim yan, no? After correcting of currency exchange rate, yung kanyang net transaction exposure is low, mababa, no? Kasi nagkaroon ka ng positive cash flow, no? Ngayon, yung analyst can estimate economic exposure accurately kung ang currency exchange rate ay nag-display ng trend. Yun yung sinasabi ko na parang isang tingin mo pa lang, more or less nakikita mo, okay, nagte-trend up. Okay, by the end of the month, ito ang magiging ano niyan, no? Exchange rate. Paano pag hindi? No? Yun ang mabigat. At saka, paano kung hindi mo naman ma ma-accurately predict yung future cash flow mo with certainty. 'Di ba? Halimbawa, hindi mo alam kung ano magiging sales mo next month, next month, o kaya sa bawat quarter hindi mo mape-predict anong gagawin mong growth factor. Mahirap talagang gawin 'yan. Akala lang natin madali na pero mahirap talaga 'yan, no? Okay, yan. So ito naman yung susunod, no? Halos ito yung pinag-usapan natin nung sa una, no? Last 5 slides. So yung chapter 20 is about the political, country, and global specific risks. Well, sa Philippines, yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, imagine if you're coming from other countries and you see this, ito yung nagiging nagiging hesitation nila in coming to the Philippines, no? And kaya ako sinasabi ng Philippines kasi andito tayo, how dare we speak of other nations, for example. Of course, we will talk about the Philippines because we're here. Okay, and I have nothing against our country. It's just a matter of fact. And these are the things that when other people, other countries would look at our nation and they see some problems here and there, syempre hindi yun mag-i-invest. Kaya nga, isa sa pinakamalaking metric, no, or measure ng how stable or how unstable the political climate in our country is FDI, no? Yung foreign denominated investment, no, yung inflow na yan. Pag kasi wala nag-i-invest coming from outside, then ibig sabihin ang idea nila is teka, may problema tayong nation na yan, no? Sa atin naman, in fairness, maganda naman, no? Even yung ating rating is good, no? Maganda yung rating ng Philippines, no? Sa Moody's rating, no? Yung tawag natin na Moody's, S&P, yan, no? Yung Standard & Poor's, saka yung Fitch, yan yung tatlong yan, no? Sulat natin, no? Fitch, Moody's, yan ang mga prime natin, no? Saka Standard & Poor's, no? S&P. Okay, yan ang ating mga ginagamit, no? Sa ating yan. Yan ang ating mga trading agencies, no? So, yan. Okay. Kasi natin ito, no? So yung political risk, syempre nag-originate yan sa government, no? Because the government can impose authority over the over the enterprise operations, no? Within a border or even outside the border. So, pag merong international company or investor nag-establish ng business within a foreign country, yung host government, merong sarili niyang law, rules, regulation, taxes. So, yan yung mga sinasabi ko kanina, no? Some governments view the foreign businesses or international investors unfavorably and they punish the business for or expropriate the business assets. So nangyari dito, example, no? When Brazil, I think it was Brazil who although 90s pa to who did the Protectionism Act, no, for their brewery. I think they did not accept Anheuser-Busch, no, yung ano ng Budweiser, no. Hindi nila yan tinanggap, no. Parang anong nangyari ay pinoteksyonan nila, they tried to protect the local manufacturers of beers, and therefore they did not allow imported, no, mga beer. Okay, nag-impose sila ng mataas na levy, no, ng tax, making it impossible for these international companies to enter the country. So pag ganun, yun ang problem doon, may protectionism act. Kaya nga pag hindi open ang market o kaya naman na medyo may ganun, no, protectionism, win-lose strategy yan eh. It may win for the local supplier, local manufacturer, pero in the global scale, loss pa rin ang nangyayari because we cannot deny the fact that we are operating under the global standard. So wala tayong magagawa ron, no? So political risk comes in many forms. For example, yung mga firm-specific risk o kaya micro risk, no? Microeconomics ang tawag dyan, no? Microeconomics, no? Okay. Foreign business yan, yung host government encounters a conflict. No? Different firms experience distinctive risk. For example, a restaurant chain should experience a different risk level than an electronics manufacturing company. Iba-iba yan, no? Ang restaurant chains naman leases its space and competes with numerous local businesses. So, yung mga example binibigyan niya rito, no? Whereas an electronics manufacturing facility requires billions of dollars in investment. So depende. So may mga risk na specific sa kanyang industry. So usually naman pag open ang country sa tourism, syempre pare-pareho yan. Mas malaki naman ang risk mo on competition rather than yung mga taxes and all that, no? Depende kasi sa ano mo, no, sa level ng risk na binibigay ng nation, no? Kasi nga depende sa ano yan sa kanilang policy, no? Yan. Ang officials ng government then will know about the electronics company well, but their sources may not appear on the government's radar, no? So ibig sabihin dito, yung mga electronics company, big deal yan kasi. So kaya a firm has currency exchange rate, although the exchange rate is a firm-specific risk, the government does not directly impose the risk into the business. Ibig sabihin, yung currency exchange risk, firm-specific yun, no? Pero hindi siya government-imposed. So, ibig sabihin, ang government-imposed yung mga rules regarding a certain industry na, like, halimbawa, bawal lang, ano ba magandang example niya, no? Lalo na sa firm. Yung nga, sa mining, yun, ang importante doon. Halimbawa, yung percentage ng foreign, bawal ang ganito, yung certain magmamine ng kailangan i-surrender mo sa ganyan, kailangan meron kang pumasa ka doon sa pollution control something. So lahat ng mga yan ay policies, no? And they are firm specific. Okay? Measuring country risk. Firms investing in foreign markets are exposed to risk associated with the country. So, napag-usapan natin to, no? Yung political climate, napag-usapan natin to, yung mga halimbawa na binoto yung mga socialist, no? Sinasabi ko, mga socialist. Kasi ibig sabihin ng pag-socialism, under ng government, no? Government control. Katulad sa Cuba, no? Dati, no? Ganyan yan, no? O kaya naman nationalist. Ayan na, pag ang government nagsimula ng mag-seize ng property, so therefore, hindi na open yan, no? Hindi na capitalism yan, socialism na. So mahirap mag-invest pag ganun sa country yan, no? So the value for investment would plummet in value as international visitors, investors, and businesses flee the country. Ito, yung sa Venezuela, nung inelect daw si Hugo Chavez, yung government began nationalizing industries, no? Nina-nationalize yung mga industries. Ibig sabihin, hindi na, sa amin na to, sa government na to. So, ang mangyayari dyan, nagkakaroon ng exodus ng foreign capital. Yung mga FDI, bumababa, no? Nangyayari dyan, government could weaken property rights or impose new taxes on foreign businesses, tataas ang price nila, hindi naman sila makakapag-compete. Yan, noong 1998 din, nagkaroon daw ng Russian debt crisis, no? 1998, tapos yung default ng Argentina noong 2002, and therefore yun, nagkaroon ng rapid decline, no? Because of that, mga country risk yan. Ito yung sinasabi ko, yung International Credit Rating Agency, hindi sila naka-focus sa risk ng particular companies, pero ina-assist nila yung investment risk associated with countries. So yun, nabanggit na natin to. So example natin dyan, halimbawa daw, no? You transferred money to a Jamaican company for a coffee shipment. The company eagerly accepted your money, but it had failed to deliver your coffee. In developed countries, you could sue a company to enforce a contract. But Jamaica has weak institutions, and unfortunately, judges and magistrates may not enforce contract. Investors, legal options vary by country, and therefore, yung international credit rating agencies somehow gives you an understanding or parang a warning sign whether a country is medyo stable ba yung country o hindi, investment grade ba yan? Yung tawag doon, investment grade, no? Yun ang nagbibigay ng ng rating. Okay, so yeah, that's it for today. I hope somehow you learned something from the lessons we're doing. So the next topic is we have to proceed to other areas in international finance. But after this, you'll have a short quiz regarding these topics. So that's it, unless you have questions. Maraming salamat for joining. Thank you very much. Bye.